Wellesley's class of 1969 was never satisfied with the status quo. Their decade was, some of them are present today, right? Their decade was marked by questions, protests, demands, dreams, and visions. As part of that decade, the class of 1969 successfully demanded and brought to Wellesley a number of things that we find so familiar today that we are unaware that they were ever controversial. The Upward Bound program, the Black Student Center, now known as Harambee House, the relaxed parietal rules, and eventually no parietal rules at all, expanded the expanded curriculum and pass-fail options, to name just a few. And when they made the audacious request for a student speaker at their commencement, something which had never been done before, it's not surprising that they chose their own dynamic president of college government, Hillary Rodham. Hillary Rodham's speech at Commencement 1969 has become a legendary speech in the Wellesley archives. After graduating from Wellesley with high honors and earning her law degree at Yale Law School, Hillary worked for the Children's Defense Fund and the Carnegie Council on Children. She became legal counsel to the impeachment inquiry staff of the House Judiciary Committee during Richard Nixon's presidency, and then subsequently married Bill Clinton and moved to Arkansas, where she taught criminal law at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. Becoming an expert in the field of child law and children's rights, she was also an innovative litigator, achieving wide recognition as a legal theorist and strategist. She serves on the boards of the National Center on Education and the Economy, the Arkansas Children's Hospital, the Children's Television Workshop, and the Southern Development Bank Corporation. She has been called one of the most important scholar activists of the last 2 decades. She's also been a great friend of Wellesley in Arkansas, recruiting scores of students through frequent teas at the governor's mansion. Next Sunday, her name will be presented to the annual meeting of the Wellesley Alumni Association for election as an alumna trustee. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you my fellow Arkansan, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Thank you.
That is absolutely true about all those teas, and I'm glad to have that on the public record. I must say, though, that sitting there listening to the recitation of what my class and those on both sides were responsible for was a little bit unsettling, but probably the only thing I would revisit is, as the mother of a 12-year-old daughter, the parietal rules. This is, as Nan says, the second chance for me to speak from this podium. The first was 23 years ago, when I was a graduating senior. My classmates did select me to speak, and I tried to speak for them. I can't claim that 1969 speech as my own. It reflected the hopes, values, and aspirations of my classmates. It was full of the uncompromising language you only write when you are 21. But it is uncanny to me the degree to which those same hopes, values, and aspirations have shaped my adulthood. We passionately rejected the notion of limitations on our abilities to make the world a better place. We saw a gap between our expectations and realities, and we were inspired in large part by our Wellesley educations to bridge that gap. On behalf of the class of 1969, I said then that the challenge now is to practice politics as the art of making what appears impossible possible. That is still the challenge of politics, especially in today's far more cynical climate. The aspiration I referred to then was the struggle for an integrated life in an atmosphere of trust and respect. What I meant by that was a life that combines personal fulfillment in love and work with fulfilling responsibility to the larger community. Now, when the ceremonies and hoopla of my graduation were over, I commenced my adult life by heading straight for the lake. In those days, and probably still now, swimming in the lake, except at the beach and at certain times, was prohibited. But it was one of my favorite rules to break. I stripped down to my swimsuit, put my clothes in a pile on the ground, took off those Coke bottle glasses that you've now seen in 100 pictures and publications from one end of this country to the next, and waded in off Tupelo Point. While I was happily paddling around, feeling relieved, as Emily must as well, that I had survived the day, a security guard came by on his grounds, picked up my clothes and my glasses, and carried them off. Imagine my surprise when I emerged to find neither clothes nor glasses, and blind as a bat, had to feel my way back to Stone Davis. I am just so grateful that picture has not come back to haunt me, because you can imagine the captions. Maybe girl offers vision to classmates and then loses her own. Or better still, the tabloids might have run something like, girl swimming, blinded by aliens after seeing Elvis. Well, while medical technology has allowed me to replace those glasses with contact lenses, I hope my vision today is clearer for another reason: the clarifying perspective of experience. The opportunity to share that experience with you, the honored graduates of the class of 1992, is not only a privilege, but a homecoming for me, and I want to be somewhat personal. Wellesley nurtured and challenged and guided me. It instilled in me not just knowledge, but a reserve of sustaining values. I also made friends who are still among my closest friends today. When I arrived as a freshman in 1965 from my Ozzie and Harriet suburb of Chicago, both the college and the country were going through a period of rapid, sometimes tumultuous change. My classmates and I felt challenged, and in turn did challenge from the moment we arrived everything about the college. Nothing was taken for granted. We couldn't even agree on an appropriate, politically correct cheer. To this day, when we attend reunions, you can hear us cry, 1969 Wellesley Rah, one more year, still no cheer. But you know, there often seemed little to cheer about in those days. We grew up in a decade dominated by dreams and disillusionments. Dreams of the civil rights movement, the Peace Corps, the space program. Disillusionments starting with President Kennedy's assassination, accelerated by the divisive war in Vietnam, and the deadly mixture of poverty, racism, and despair that burst into flames in the hearts of some of our cities then, and which is still burning today. A decade when speeches like, "I have a dream," were followed by songs like "The Day the Music Died." I was here on campus when Martin Luther King was murdered. My friends and I put on black armbands and went into Boston to march in anger and pain, feeling as many of you did after the acquittals in the Rodney King case. Much has changed in those intervening years, and much of it for the better. But much has also stayed the same, or at least not changed as much as we had hoped or as irrevocably. Each new generation takes us into new territory. But while change is certain, progress is not. Change is a law of nature. Progress is the challenge for both a life and a society. And what better place to speak about those challenges, particularly to women, and the challenge of leading an integrated life than here at Wellesley, a college that not only vindicates the proposition that there is still an essential place for an all-women's college, but which defines its mission as seeking to educate women who will make a difference in the world. And what better time to speak about women and their concerns than in the spring of 1992. I have traveled all over America in the last months, talking and listening to women. Women who are struggling to raise their children and somehow make ends meet. Women who are battling against the persistent discrimination that still limits their opportunities for pay and promotions. Women who are bumping up against the glass ceiling, who are watching the insurance premiums on themselves and their families increase, who are coping with inadequate or non-existent child support payments after divorces which lead to precipitous drops in their standards of living. Women who are existing on shrinking welfare payments with no available jobs in sight. And women who are anguishing over the prospect that abortions will be criminalized again. These women and their voices are there to be heard and seen and listened to by any of us. I've also talked with women about our shared values, about our common desire to educate our children, to be sure they do receive the health care they need, to protect them from the escalating violence in our streets, to wonder how we ever got to a position in our country where we have children in schools that do bullet drills instead of fire drills. Worrying about children is something women do and that mothers are particularly good at doing. But you know, women who pack their children's lunch for school, who take the early bus to work, or stay out late for a PTA meeting, or spend every spare minute tending to their aging parents, do not need lectures from Washington about values. They don't need to hear about an idealized world that never was as righteous or carefree as some would like to think. They and we need understanding and a helping hand to solve our own problems, because most of us are doing the best we can to find whatever that right balance is for our own lives. For me, the elements of that balance are family, work, and service. First, your personal relationships. When all is said and done, it is the people in your life, the friendships you form, and the commitments you maintain that give shape to that life. Your friends and your neighbors, the people at work, at church, wherever you come into contact with them, all who touch your daily lives. And if you choose, a marriage filled with love and respect. When I stood here before, I could never have predicted, let alone believed, that I would fall in love with someone named Bill Clinton, who grew up in the same town as Nan. That circle, Emily, really is smaller than we think. and that I would follow my heart to a place called Arkansas. But I have to tell you, based on the years that stand between you and me, I'm very glad I had the courage to make that choice. Second, your work. For some of you, that may overlap with your contribution to your community. For some of you, the future might not include work outside the home, and I don't mean involuntary unemployment. But most of you will, at some point in your life, work for pay in jobs that used to be off limits for women or for those that are still the backbone of the kind of nurturing and caring professions that are so important. You may choose to be a corporate executive or a rocket scientist. You may run for public office. You may choose to stay home and raise your children. But now you can make any or all of those choices, and they can be the work of your life. And the third element for me, and I hope for you, of that integrated life I alluded to those years ago, is service. As students, we debated passionately what responsibility each individual has for the larger society. We went back and forth on just what our college's Latin motto meant, not to be ministered onto, but to minister. The most eloquent explanation I have found of what I believe now and what I argued then is from Václav Havel, the playwright and first freely elected president of Czechoslovakia. In a letter from prison to his wife, Olga, he wrote, "Everything meaningful in life is distinguished by a certain transcendence of individual human existence, beyond the limits of mere self-care, toward other people, toward society, toward the world. Only by looking outward, by caring for things that, in terms of pure survival, you needn't bother with at all, and by throwing yourself over and over again into the tumult of the world with the intention of making your voice count, only thus will you really become a person." I first recognized what service I cared most about while I was in law school, where I worked with children at the Yale New Haven Hospital and the Child Study Center and represented children through legal services, and where during my first summer I worked for the Children's Defense Fund. My experiences gave voice for me to deep feelings about what children deserved from their families and their government. I discovered that I wanted my voice to count for children. Some of you may have already had such a life-shaping experience, the arts, the environment, other human rights issues, whatever it might be. For many of you, it lies ahead, but recognize it and nurture it when it occurs. Because my concern is making children count, I hope you will indulge me while I tell you why. The American dream is an intergenerational compact, or as someone once said, one generation is supposed to leave the key under the mat for the next. We repay our parents for their love in the love we give children, and we repay our society for the opportunities we are given by expanding the opportunities given to others. That's the way it's supposed to work. You know too well that it is not. Too many of our children are being impoverished financially, socially, and spiritually. The shrinking of their futures diminishes us all. Whether you end up having children of your own or not, I hope each of you will recognize the need for a sensible national family policy that reverses the absolutely unforgivable neglect of our children in this country in this year. If you have children, you will owe the highest duty to them and will confront your biggest challenges in parenting them. If, like me at your age, you now know little and maybe care less about the mysteries of good parenting, I can promise you there is nothing like on-the-job training. I remember one very long night when my daughter Chelsea was about 4 weeks old and crying inconsolably. Nothing from my courses in my political science major seemed to help at all. Finally, I looked at her in my arms and I said, "Chelsea, you've never been a baby before and I've never been a mother before. We are just going to have to help each other get through this." And so far, we have. And for Bill and me, she has been the great joy of our life, and watching her grow and flourish has given even greater urgency to the task of helping all children. There are many ways of helping children. You can do it through your own personal lives by being dedicated, loving parents. You can do it in medicine, or Professor Jander has done in music, social work or education, business or government service. You can do it by making policy or making cookies. It is though a false choice to tell women or men, for that matter, that we must choose between caring for ourselves and our own families or caring for the larger family of humanity. In their recent pastoral letter, Putting Children and Families First, the National Conference of Catholic Bishops captured this essential interplay of private and public roles. No government can love a child, and no policy can substitute for a family's care. But government can either support or undermine families. There has been an unfortunate, unnecessary, and unreal polarization in discussions of how best to help families. The undeniable fact is that our children's future is shaped both by the values of their parents and the policies of our nation. Or as my husband says, family values alone won't feed a hungry child, and material security cannot provide a moral compass. We need both. 45 years ago, the biggest threat to our country came from the other side of the Iron Curtain, from the nuclear weapons that could wipe out life on our planet. While you were here at Wellesley, that threat ended. But today, our greatest threat comes not from some external evil empire, but from our own internal, indifferent empire that tolerates splintered families, unparented children, embattled schools, and pervasive poverty, racism, and violence. Not for one more year can our country think of children as some asterisks on our national agenda. How we treat our children should be front and center of that agenda, or I believe it won't matter what else is on it. My plea is that you not only nurture the values that will determine the choices you make in your personal lives, but also insist on policies that include those values to nurture our nation's children. But really, Hillary, some of you may be saying to yourselves, I've got to pay off my student loans. I can't even find a good job, let alone someone to love. How am I going to worry about the world? Our generation has fewer dreams, fewer illusions than yours. And I hear you and millions of young women like you all over our country. As women today, you do face tough choices. And you know, the rules are basically as follows. If you don't get married, you're abnormal. If you get married but don't have children, you're a selfish yuppie. If you get married and have children but then go outside the home to work, you're a bad mother. If you get married and have children but stay home, you've wasted your education. And if you don't get married but have children and work outside the home as a fictional newscaster, you get in trouble with the vice president. So, you see, if you listen to all those people who make all those rules, you might conclude that the safest course is just to take your diploma and crawl under your bed. But let me end by proposing an alternative. Hold on to your dreams, whatever they are. Take up the challenge of forging an identity that transcends yourself. Transcend yourself and you will find yourself. Care about something that you needn't bother with at all. Throw yourself into the world and make your voice count. Whether you make your voice count for children or for another cause, enjoy your life's journey. There is no dress rehearsal for life, and you will have to ad-lib your way through every scene. The only way to prepare is to do what you have done. Get the best possible education. Continue to learn from literature, scripture, and history to understand the human experience as best you can so that you do have guideposts charting the terrain toward whatever decisions are right for you. I want you to remember this day and remember how much more you have in common with each other than with people who are trying to divide you. And I want you to stand together as you appear to me from this position, beautiful, brave, and invincible. And to have a sense of celebration that you carry with you. Congratulations to each of you. Look forward and welcome the challenges ahead. And if you'd like to meet me for a swim later, don't tell the security guards, just find me. And I hope that over the next years, you will look back on this day as a truly great opportunity that leads you to transcend and to forge an identity that is uniquely your own. Godspeed.